While reading the pages for class today, I kept trying to keep in mind the ideas that made my stories distinct from me morals. They seem to be very similar in my head since both emphasize personal experience, the internet or other digital media means, and the ability of amateurs. But after reading, I now believe that the me morals focus more on the collective than the my stories did. Electronic monuments recognize that commemoration is an experience joining the individual and collective identities that must be adapted to electricity. This emphasis on the collective education and identity is what sets it from my stories, I believe. In the reading, Ulmer uses his example of the Florida Rushmore as an example of a type of memorial or electronic monument that could be developed for the Floridian county. And while his discussion of this virtual personal monument helped to illustrate some of the main features of an electronic monument, some other aspects he covered made more sense. And while the rest of this presentation will follow my fumbling thoughts through this article, I am also keeping the idea that undergraduates need to learn this in the back of my mind. One of my first suggestions is to steer clear of the mention of ancient Greeks. Sure, graduate students know who Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are and what all their connections are to each other, but for the most part, undergraduates won't be sure on this subject. Ancient Greek history was not a topic discussed in my high school, so by mentioning them, you'll just add confusion and redirect attention. Next, I would lay out diagrams of the ideas when they relate to orality and to literacy and then to electricity. Ulmer often says something is a part of one realm, and representing it visually will help cement this concept. For example, with the section on the mise en scene of disaster, he talks about how they handled the idea of an individual's foolishness can cause a calamity in society. With orality, they explain this by drama and chance. With literacy, there was a fight to solve this, and with electricity, the result is still unclear. So I would include a diagram anytime these connections are made. One large connection that I made between the two ideas of me morals and my stories was the idea of the theoria. Ulmer classifies theoria by first recognizing its ancient roots in Greek history. Originally it meant seeing for yourself, a form of active observation. It wasn't simply studying an area. Theoria involves being open to any kind of emotional, imaginative, and sensory experience. This involves becoming self-conscious, reflexive, and potentially intelligent. This really made a light bulb go off in my head because it helped explain how this can contribute to both self and collective intelligence. A gathering of different personal experiences for a commemoration has no value unless individuals open themselves to experiences and reflect. But me morals can also be an individual project that allows for simply the creator to open themselves to experiences and reflect, which reminded me of the experience one gets from creating a my story. Me morals witness a disaster in progress. It doesn't look at something through another source, and it doesn't want us to remove ourselves from our own experiences. The idea of the testimonial is an artifact from literacy and does not necessarily involve our capability to witness an event or recognize our participation in it. People who experience and witness the events and can testify are also occasionally rendered unable to testify. This inability of expressing what one witnesses challenges the very idea that we hold conventionally as commemoration. A light bulb went off in my head in relation to this idea. The ability of one to simply witness an event seems ridiculous to those that lived through the actual events. They weren't simply witnessing, they were involved. In regards to 9/11, the people who were around the towers that day and survived were not merely witnesses. By saying that these individuals are witnesses does not grasp their own personal experiences with what occurred that day. They experienced that day through their own senses, and they have their own testimonies that no second-hand account could ever fully grasp. An electronic monument, then, thus works better than a physical monument for expressing personal experiences and identity alongside a collective identity. Each of us have our own histories and experiences from that day that are mixed with the experiences of our collective, our nation-state, the United States of America. My own personal experiences that become a part of my memorial in regards to 9/11 revolve around where I was that day, on break between classes at my junior high, pictured here, and how it affected me for the rest of my life. I still remember the stories I heard about those in my school who knew victims from the terrorist attacks. But a part of my me moral also involves aspects of a collective identity that, for the most part, is still based around our nation state. Part of this reason is due to the fact that 9/11 occurred in 2001 before I had much experience, or probably a lot of people did, with the internet and the digital world. 9/11 has become a part of our national identity. I remember the front pages of the newspapers the next day with the images of the World Trade Centers on fire and collapsing. These images have become a part of our group subject, a place occupying the space between the individual and the collective, a place that is a part of both. The images of the towers carry a load of values that most Americans will be able to identify. They have meaning beyond what an outsider might suspect. I remember a photograph of houses with American flags expressing what the terrorists have changed. Images like that, and this one, show the influence of the collective identity on our me morals. The internet is the perfect site for electronic monuments because it allows for the development of self-knowledge by connecting the individual with the collective. Much like how my stories allow people to create their own stories and histories, me morals allow for people to connect their individual and collective thoughts to reflect and gain knowledge. Like Ulmer stated that an electronic Rushmore is better than a stone one and that the identification possible is flexible and diverse, so are electronic monuments and me morals. These allow for the inclusion of multiple individual elements that provide personal meaning and therefore mourning within the collective.